Three, two, one. Meow, meow, meow. I think we are ready. Switch over here. Hello, 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 hello. Okay. So this won't be the longest of streams, obviously. Kind of late over here. We're gonna see how much we can get through the looking glass and what Alice found there here today. I have set up the slideshow. We can see all the illustrations. You can't really see them too well over here, huh? Well, I mean, I guess they look better like on the actual YouTube video. Now, what the hell? It's gonna beep like that every single time I move the illustration. Okay, this sucks. I did this wrong. I did this the wrong way. No, no, this ruins everything. All my planning. It was very little planning, to be completely honest. Are you gonna be okay with that, chat? Are you gonna be okay with that? I'm not gonna be changing that picture like constantly. Oh, okay, duh. I was just hitting the wrong things. Okay, that was me being an idiot. The sound's not there. The sound's not there. Okay, chat. We've okay. I've I've been reassured. I feel a lot better about things now. I just I was just hitting the wrong freaking buttons, that's all. Hello, 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 and welcome back to Satyen Reads. This is video live stream number 2 of our new channel. You go ahead and post the tweets and the blue skies. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Edit post. Been spelling what the proper way. What the frick? What the hell? Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? Please tell me that that's just because. Oh, yeah. Not damn thing. Hold on 2 whole seconds. Damn it, we gotta get going now. This is too late. This is way too late for me to be lollygagging like this. I want you to show the like actual video link. freaking working. Okay, okay, okay. I know it. This work or not? What the hell? What the freaking heck? I'll be the link. You don't need do 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 do. All right, let's see. If I post it here like this, yeah, definitely. Delete. Does the thing, but it just is not as it's aesthetically pleasing. Like it to be entire thumbnail. Must be Twitter being Twitter is what they're saying. All right, no use crying over spilt milk. We got to get going. All right, here we go. Please click my link, damn it. Please, please. I know it's not the best looking thing in the world, but please, please click my link, please, for the love of God. Let's go. Post it. Post it. It's freaking posted. All right, moving on. Let's close that stupid tab so I don't have to look at it anymore. All right, we're over it. We're over it. We are over it. See, thank you, Blue Sky, thank you, thank you. You did it. Oh shit! Wait, that's the wrong one. Whoopsies. Delete. Delete. All right, whatever. I don't think it's gonna. Yeah, it didn't do it. Of course. Whatever. Whatever. We're over it. We're freaking over it. Okay, okay, okay. Important things. Shut up. We're done. I'm sorry, but it was important. I shouldn't be telling you to shut up, though. I'm sorry. I apologize. I was just upset with you rushing me. That's all, chat. Why are you so judgmental? Damn it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so freaking sorry. I just haven't had my tea. That's not this I apologize for this entire stream. I am so sorry for this whole scuff stream. I should have gone with my instinct and done Monster Hunter Wild stream. But here we are, chat. Here we freaking are. Welcome. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you're having a fantastic night. Whatever you, wherever, whenever you may be doing, I hope you are appreciating existence and the beauty of the world. There's a lot of crappy stuff out there, but one of the beautiful things about this amazing planet was that people figured out how to write things down and tell stories and, like share those sorts of things. And that's why we're here today to read some stories about Alice going through the looking glass. I'm not entirely sure what this one's about. I know she went to Wonderland, but yeah, I've never read this one. I don't know. I don't know exactly what we're gonna be getting into here, but it's definitely things to do with Wonderland. Alrighty then. I like this book because there's a lot of like little uh notes at the bottom, but I can't be reading all of them for you. Alice Liddell's middle name was Pleasance. Through the Looking Glass was published in December 1871. Its title page bears the date 1872. Alice Liddell was 16 and a half years old at the end of 1871. In Through the Looking Glass, Alice is 7.5 years old, 6 months older than she is in the first Alice book. The first book is set in May. Through the Looking Glass, Without a Frost, The Blinding Snow, is set in November. The phrase set off in quotation marks, Happy Summer Days, closes the last chapter of Alice's adventures in Wonderlands, and thus marks the start of a difference between that story and the tone and autumnal setting of its successor. Interesting. Anything else that we should read? We're reading the text of Through the Looking Glass and what Alice found there. Let's see. So we have the preface, chapter 1, and then it goes up to chapter 12. Hopefully, we can finish this whole thing, but I don't think so. I don't think we're going to be doing that today. I think that we're going to get through like maybe half of it. We'll probably finish the rest of it tomorrow. Okay, so is this the preface or is this just like a little intro poem? Seems like Lewis Carroll, the author, like doing those, writing little addendums and additions. Okay, so yeah, this is not the preface. This is just a poem. And then chapter 1, Looking Glass House. You all ready, chat? Well, let's have one more cup of tea. All right, we'll have one more nice cup of. Quick. All right, get ready. Here we go. Meow, meow, meow. That one's for you. I hope you're great. Fantastic. Amazing. Where's my mouth? I'm so sorry. Got freaking stream. And also, I just sort of threw on like a Thrasher sweater. Do you like it? Cool. No, I can't do a kickflip. Child of the pure, unclouded brow and dreaming eyes of wonder, though time be fleet and I and thou are half a life asunder, thy loving smile will surely hail the love gift of a fairy tale. I have not seen thy sunny face nor heard thy silver laughter. No thought of me shall find a place in thy young's life hereafter. Enough that now thou wilt not fail to listen to my fairy tale, a tale begun in other days when summer suns were glowing, a simple chime that serves to time the rhythm of our rowing, whose echoes live in memory yet, though envious years would say forget. Come hearken then, your voice of dread, with bitter tidings laden, shall summon to unwelcome bed a melancholy maiden. But we are but older children, dear, who fret to find our bedtime near. Without the frost, the blinding snow, the storm wind's moody madness, within the firelight's ruddy glow, and childhood's nest of gladness. The magic woods shall hold thee fast, though thou shalt not heed the raving blast. And though and though the shadow of a sigh may tremble through the story, for happy summer days gone by and vanished summer glory, it shall not touch with breath of bale the pleasance of our fairy tale. Hmm. Interesting. Next up, this one I didn't find a picture of, but we have like a little chessboard. And underneath it, so the top says red, the bottom says white. White is pawn Alice to play and win in 11 moves. So Alice meets the Red Queen, first chapter. Alice through Q's third by railway to Q's fourth, Tweedledee and Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Alice meets WQ with Shawl. Alice to Q's fifth, Shop, River Shop. Alice to Q's sixth, Humpty Dumpty. Alice to Q's seventh, Forest. WKT takes RKT. Alice to Q's eighth, Coronation. Alice becomes Queen. Alice Castles Feast. Alice takes RQ and wins. RQ and KR is fourth. WQ to QB fourth after Shawl. WQ to QB fifth becomes sheep. W key to KB eighth leaves egg on shelf. W key to QB eighth flying from RKT. RKT to K's second. CH. WKT to KB fifth. RQ to SQ square examination. Queen's Castle. And W key to QR sixth soup. A whole lot of code there. I'm sure it means something. Oh, here we go. Preface to the 1897 edition. As the chess problem given on the previous page has puzzled some of my readers, it may be well to explain that it is correctly worked out, so as far as the moves are concerned. The alternation of red and white is perhaps not so strictly observed as it might be, and the castling of the three queens is merely a way of saying that they entered the palace, but the check of the white king at move 6 and the capture of the red knight at move 7 and the final checkmate of the red king will be found by anyone who will take the trouble to set the pieces and play the moves as directed to be strictly in accordance with the laws of the game. The new words in the poem Jabberwocky have given rise to some differences of opinion as to the pronunciation, so it may be well to give instructions on that point as well. Pronounce slithy as if it were the two words sly, make the G hard as in gyre and gimbal, pronounce wrath to rhyme with bath. Mm-mm-mm. Slithy. But where's the freaking slithy have to do with jabber? Oh my god. For this 61st of thousand, fresh electrotypes have been taken from the wood blocks, which having never been used for printing, which never having been used for printing from, are in as good condition as when first cut in 1871. And the whole book has been set up afresh with new type. If the artistic qualities of this reissue fall short in any particular of those possessed by the original issue, it will not be for want of painstaking on the part of the author, publisher, or printer. I take this opportunity of announcing that the nursery Alice, hitherto priced at 4 shillings net, is now to be had on the same terms as the ordinary shilling picture books. although I feel sure that it is in every quality except the text itself, on which I am not qualified to pronounce, greatly superior to them. 4 shillings was perfectly reasonable price to charge, considering the very heavy initial outlay I had incurred. Still, as the public have practically said, we will not give more than a shilling for a picture book. However artistically got up, I am content to reckon my outlay on the book as so much dead loss. And rather than let the little ones, for whom it was written, go without it, I am selling it at a price which is to me much the same thing as giving it away. Christmas, 1896. So he's saying he's not making any profit off this. He just wants to make sure the story gets out there for the people. Good job. All right, so that's the introduction. Over here, Nightbot, are you awake? Are you freaking awake, Nightbot? Please be here. Please be here. We have to give it some time with Nightbot. I need to log into Nightbot. Nightbot online. Nightbot, come on. Hurry up. Damn it. There you are. Thank you. Thank you. We need that slash me. Need a slash. Update. Thank you. Okay, check out. Okay, yeah, we didn't need that slash me. Join our Discord so you can let us know what we should read next. Also, follow Japan Spitz. We're getting him to 1 million subscribers this year. Thank you, Nightbot. Thank you for being awake. Thank you for existing. We appreciate you. You're fantastic. Thank you. Chapter 1, Looking Glass House. So that starts us off with this picture here that we are looking at. Some sort of knight, and Alice is walking beside him. I don't think we've encountered him in the story just yet. But what we will encounter is Dinah, the little kitten. Looking Glass House. One thing was certain, that the white kitten had nothing to do with it. It was the black kitten's fault entirely, for the white kitten had been having its face washed by the old cat for the last quarter of an hour, and bearing it pretty well considering. So you see that it couldn't have had any hand in the mischief. The way Dinah washed her children's faces was this. First she held the poor thing down by its ear with one paw. Then with the other paw she rubbed its face all over, the wrong way, beginning at the nose, and just now, as I said, she was hard at work on the white kitten, which was lying quite still and trying to purr, no doubt feeling that it was all meant for its good. But the black kitten had been finished with earlier in the afternoon, and so, while Alice was sitting curled up in the corner of the great armchair, half talking to herself and half asleep, the kitten had been having a grand game of romps with the ball of worsted Alice had been trying to wind up, and had been rolling it up and down till it all had come until it had all come undone again, and there it was, spread over the hearthrug, all knots and tangles, with the kitten running after its own tail in the middle. "Oh, you wicked little thing!" cried Alice, catching up to the kitten and giving it a little kiss to make it understand that it was in disgrace. "Really, Dinah ought to have taught you better manners. You ought, Dinah, you know you ought," she added, looking reproachfully at the old cat, and speaking in as cross a voice as she could manage. And then she scrambled back into the armchair, taking the kitten and the worsted with her, and began winding up the ball again. But she didn't get on very fast, as she was talking all the time, sometimes to the kitten and sometimes to herself. Katie sat very demurely on her knee, pretending to watch the progress of the winding, and now and then putting out one paw and gently touching the ball, as if it would be glad to help if it might. Do you know what tomorrow is, Kitty? Alice began. You'd have guessed if you'd been up in the window with me. Only Dinah was making you tidy, so you couldn't. I was watching the boys getting in sticks for the bonfire, and it wants plenty of sticks, Kitty. Only it got so cold and it snowed so they had to leave off. Never mind, Kitty. We'll go and see the bonfire tomorrow. Here, Alice wound 2 or 3 turns of the worsted around the kitten's neck just to see how it would look. This led to a scramble in which the ball rolled down upon the floor, and yards of it got unwound again. Do you know I was so angry, Kitty, Alice went on as soon as they were comfortably settled again, when I saw all the mischief you had been doing. I was very nearly opening the window and putting you out into the snow, and you'd have deserved it, you little mischievous darling. What have you got to say for yourself? Now don't interrupt me, she went on, holding up one finger. I'm going to tell you all your faults. Number one, you squeaked twice while Dinah was washing your face this morning. Now you can't deny it. Kitty, I heard you. What's that you say? Pretending that the kitten was speaking. Her paw went into your eye. Well, that's your fault for keeping your eyes open. If you'd shut them up tight, it wouldn't have happened. Now don't make any more excuses, but listen. Number two, you pulled Snowdrop away by the tail just as I had pulled you down the saucer of milk before her. What? You were thirsty, were you? How do you know she wasn't thirsty too? Now for number three, you unwound every bit of the worsted while I wasn't looking. That's 3 faults, Kitty, and you have not been punished for any of them yet. You know, I'm saving up all your punishments for Wednesday week. Suppose that they had saved up all my punishments, she went on, talking more to herself than to the kitten. What they do at the end of a year. I should be sent to a prison, I suppose, when the day came. Or let me see. Suppose each punishment was to be going without dinner. Then, when the miserable day came, I should have to go without 50 dinners at once. Why, well, I shouldn't mind that much. I'd far rather go without them than eat than eat them. Man, Alice has a wild imagination. If tomorrow is Guy Fawkes Day, this is a little note on the bottom, on which the frustration of a 17th century attempt to blow up the House of Parliament is commemorated by a building of bonfires, then the date of this story is November 4th. Alice Liddell's birthday was May 4th. Later, she tells the White Queen that she is exactly 7.5 years old. Do you hear the snow against the window panes, Kitty? How nice and soft it sounds, just as if someone was kissing the window all over outside. I wonder if the snow loves the trees and fields that it kisses them so gently, and then it covers them up snug, with a white quilt. And perhaps it says, "Go to sleep, darlings, till the summer comes again." And when they wake up in the summer, Kitty, they dress themselves all in green and dance about whenever the wind blows. Oh, that's very pretty, cried Alice, dropping the ball of worsted to clap her hands. And I do so wish it was true. I'm sure the woods look sleepy in the autumn when the leaves are getting brown. Kitty, can you play chess? Now, don't smile, my dear. I'm asking it seriously, because when we were playing just now, you watched just as if you understood it. And when I said check, you purred. Well, it was a nice check, Kitty. And really, and really, I might have won. If it hadn't been for that nasty knight that came wriggling down among my pieces. I just got my butt beat in chess plenty of times just yesterday. Chess is interesting. I'm not very well versed in it, but it's fun. Um, Kitty dear, let's pretend. And here, I wish I could tell you half the things Alice used to say, beginning with her favorite phrase, "Let's pretend." She had quite a long argument with her sisters only the day before, all because Alice had begun with, "Let's pretend we're kings and queens," and her sister, who liked being very exact, had argued that they couldn't because there were only 2 of them, and Alice had been reduced at last to say, "Well, you can be one of them then, and I'll be all the rest." And when she had really frightened her old nurse by shouting suddenly in her ear, "Nurse, do let's pretend that I'm a hungry hyena and you're a bone." Oh my god. But this is taking us away from Alice's speech to the kitten. "Let's pretend that you're the Red Queen, Kitty. Do you know, I think if you sat up and folded your arms, you'd look exactly like her. Now do try, there's a dear." And Alice got the Red Queen off the table and set it up before the kitten as a model for it to imitate. However, the thing didn't succeed, principally, Alice said, because the kitten wouldn't fold its arms properly. So to punish it, she held it up to the looking glass that it might see how sulky it was. "And if you're not good directly," she added, "I'll put you through into Looking Glass House. How would you like that?" Now, if you'll only attend, Kitty, and not talk so much, I'll tell you all of my ideas about Looking Glass House. First, there's the room you can see through the glass. That's just the same as our drawing room. Only the things go the other way. I can see all of it when I get up on a chair. Get up on a chair. All but the bit just behind the fireplace. Oh, I do so wish I could see that bit. I want so much to know whether they've a fire in the winter. You never can tell, unless our fire smokes. And then the smoke comes up into that room too. But that may only be pretense, just to make it look as if they had a fire. Well, then, the books are something like our books, only the words go the wrong way. I know that because I've held up one of our books to the glass, and then they hold up one in the other room. How would you like to live in the Looking Glass house, Kitty? I wonder if they'd give you milk there. Perhaps Looking Glass milk isn't good to drink. But oh, Kitty, now we've come to the passage. You can just see a little peep of the passage in Looking Glass house. If you leave the door of our drawing room wide open, and it's very like our passage as far as you can see, only you know it may be quite different on beyond. Oh, Kitty, how nice it would be if we could only go through into Looking Glass House. I'm sure it's got, oh, such beautiful things in it. Let's pretend there's a way of getting through into it somehow, Kitty. Let's pretend the glass has got all soft like gauze and that we can get through. Why, it's turning into a sort of mist now, I declare. It'll be easy enough to get through. She was up on the chimney piece while she said this, though she hardly knew how she had got there, and certainly the glass was beginning to melt away like a bright silvery mist. In another moment, Alice was through the glass and had jumped lightly down into the looking glass room. The very first thing she did was to look whether there was a fire in the fireplace, and she was quite pleased to find. Oh, I'm not. I'm sorry, chat. So there's Alice, having the chat with Kitty, and then here we are at the Looking Glass, forcing our way through as if it were gauze. And then here we are in Looking Glass House. And she was quite pleased to find that there was a real one, blazing away as brightly as the one she had left behind. So I shall be as warm here as I was in the old room, thought Alice. Warmer, in fact, because there'll be no one here to scold me away from the fire. Oh, what fun it'll be when they see me through the glass in here and can't get at me. Then she began looking about and noticed that what could be seen from the old room was quite common and uninteresting, but that all the rest was as different as possible. For instance, the pictures on the wall next to the fire seemed to be alive, and the very clock of the chimney place piece, you can only see the back of it in the looking glass, got the face of a little old man and grinned at her. You can see that in that picture right there. They don't keep this room so tidy as the other, Alice thought to herself, and she noticed several of the chessmen down in the hearth among the cinders. But in another moment, with a little oh of surprise, she was down on her hands and knees watching them. The chessmen were walking about, two and two. Here are the Red King and the Red Queen, Alice said in a whisper. Oh, I guess we should have whispered that. Here are the Red King and the Red Queen, Alice said in a whisper, for fear of frightening them. And there are the White King and the White Queen sitting on the edge of the shovel. And here are two castles walking arm in arm. I don't think they can hear me, she went on, as she put her head closer down. And I'm nearly sure they can't see me. I feel somehow as if I was getting invisible. Here something began squeaking on the table behind Alice and made her turn her head just in time to see one of the white pawns roll over and begin kicking. She watched it with great curiosity to see what would happen next. It is the voice of my child, the White Queen cried out as she rushed past the king, so violently that she knocked him over among the cinders. My precious Lily, my imperial kitten! And she began scrambling wildly up the side of the fender. Imperial fiddlestick, said the king, rubbing his nose, which had been hurt by the fall. He had a right to be a little annoyed with the queen, for he was covered with ash from head to foot. Oh, I gotta remember to move forward. There we go. So all of these pictures are in order according to what they are in the book. That's them standing in the fireplace and the ashes. He got pushed down. Alice was very anxious to be of use, and as the poor little Lily was nearly screaming herself into a fit, she hastily picked up the queen and set her on the table by the side of the noisy little daughter. The queen gasped and sat down. The rapid journey through the air had quite taken away her breath, and for a minute or two she could do nothing but hug the little Lily in silence. As soon as she had recovered her breath a little, she called out to the White King, who was sitting sulkily among the ashes. Mind the volcano! What volcano? What volcano? Said the king, looking up anxiously into the fire, as if he thought that was the most likely place to find one. Blew me up, panted the queen, who was still a little out of breath. Mind you, come up the regular way. Don't get blown up. I think this is a picture of her. No, that's the king. Okay, so Alice is about to pick him up, basically. Alice watched the White King as he slowly struggled up from bar to bar, till at last she said, Why, you'll be hours and hours getting to the table at that rate. I'd be far better help to you, hadn't I? But the king took no notice of the question. It was quite clear that he could neither hear her nor see her. So Alice picked him up very gently and lifted him across more slowly than she had lifted the queen, that she mightn't take his breath away. But before she put him on the table, she thought she might as well dust him a little. He was so covered with ashes. She said afterwards that she had never seen in all her life such a face as the king made when he found himself held in the air by an invisible hand. And being dusted, he was far too much astonished to cry out, but his eyes and his mouth went on getting larger and larger, rounder and rounder, till till her hand shook with laughter that she till her hand shook so with laughter that she nearly let him drop upon the floor. And that's his face right there. You can see it right there, chat. That's the one. That do be the one. Oh, please don't make such faces, my dear, she cried out, quite forgetting that the king couldn't hear her. You make me laugh so that I can hardly hold you, and don't keep your mouth so wide open. All the ashes will get into it. There now, I think you're tidy enough, she added as she smoothed his hair and set him upon the table near the queen. The king immediately fell flat on his back and lay perfectly still, and Alice was a little alarmed at what she had done and went round the room to see if she could find any water to throw over him. However, she could find nothing but a bottle of ink, and when she got back with it, she found he had recovered, and that he and the queen were talking together in a frightened whisper, so low that Alice could hardly hear what they said. The king was saying, "I assure you, my dear, I turned cold to the very ends of my whiskers," to which the queen replied, "You haven't got any whiskers." The horror of that moment, the king went on, I shall never, never forget. You will, though, the queen said, if you don't make a memorandum of it. Alice looked on with great interest as the king took an enormous memorandum book out of his pocket and began writing. A sudden thought struck her, and she took hold of the end of the pencil, which came some way over his shoulder, and began writing for him. The poor king looked puzzled and unhappy, and struggled with the pencil for some time without saying anything. But Alice was too strong for him, and at last he panted out, "My dear, I really must get a thinner pencil. I can't manage this one a bit. It writes all manner of things that I don't intend." "What manner of things?" said the queen, looking over the book in which Alice had put. "The White King is sliding down the poker. He balances very badly." "This is not a memorandum of your feelings." There was a book lying near Alice on the table, and while she sat watching the White King, for she was still a little anxious about him, and had the ink all ready to throw over him in case he fainted again, she turned over the leaves to find some part that she could read. "For it's all in some language I don't know," she said to herself. It was like this. Oh, it's backwards. Backwards. She puzzled over this for some time, but at last a bright thought struck her. "Why, it's a looking glass book, of course, and if I hold it up to the glass, the words will go the right way again." This was the poem that Alice read. Jabberwocky. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe, and all mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome wrath outgrab. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jubjub bird and beware the jubjub bird and shun the frumi, frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested by the tumtum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tugly wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker snack. So, the knight. This is wait. What? Who's the knight? We haven't encountered the knight. Okay, so this is the random picture here. All right, and then next is the Jabberwock. I'm pretty sure that's a picture of the Jabberwock being slain by the vorpal sword. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. "And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy." "O Frabjous day, Callooh Callay," he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy tovs did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the morm ross outgrabe. "It seems very pretty," she said when she had finished it, "but it's rather hard to understand." You see, she didn't like to confess, even to herself, that she couldn't make it out at all. Somehow it seems to fill my head with ideas, only I don't exactly know what they are. However, somebody killed something, that's clear at any rate. But oh, thought Alice, suddenly jumping in, if I don't make haste, I shall have to go back through the looking glass before I've seen what the rest of the house is like. Let's have a look at the garden first. She was out of the room in a moment and ran down the stairs. Or at least it wasn't exactly running, but a new invention for getting downstairs quickly and easily, as Alice said to herself. She just kept the tips of her fingers on the handrail and floated gently down without even touching the stairs with her feet. Then she floated on through the hall and would have gone straight out the door in the same way if she hadn't caught hold of the doorpost. She was getting a little giddy with so much floating in the air and was rather glad to find herself walking again in the natural way. Here's a little note on the poem Jabberwocky. Dodgson published the first stanza of Jabberwocky, then titled Stanza of Anglo Saxon Poetry, and trickled out in a fake Old English script in Mismatch, a home miscellany he put together between 1855 and 1862. He defined some of the words in the first version of the poem. He offered other explications in Humpty Dumpty's dialogue in Chapter 6 and the preface to The Hunting of the Snark. See also Elizabeth Sewell's Balance of Brillig, Eric Partridge's The Nonsense Words of Lear and Carol, and Here, There, and Everywhere, and Martin Gardner's The Annotated Alice for further glosses of the poem. Roger Lancelin Green suggests in the Times Literary Supplements that the story of the Jabberwocky is a condensation of the plot of a translation by Manella Boot Smedley, Dodson's cousin, of the German ballad The Shepherd of the Giant Mountains. The comma after and in the first line of the penultimate stanza was included in the corrections Dodson made when he prepared an edition of the Alice's book near the end of his life. But this correction was one of two not included in an edition published in 1898. Stanley Goldman, Lewis Carroll, Final Corrections to Alice. Times Literary Supplement, May 2nd, 1958, page 248. Okay. Chapter 2 The Garden of Live Flowers. I should see the garden far better, said Alice to herself. If no pictures? Yeah, okay, we're good. That's fine. We stay with the Jabberwock. I should see the garden far better, said Alice to herself, if I could get up to the top of the hill. And here's a path that leads straight to it. At least, no, it doesn't do that. After going a few yards along the path and turning several sharp corners. But I suppose it will at last. But how curiously it twists. It's more like a corkscrew than a path. Well, this turn goes to the hill, I suppose. No, it doesn't. This goes straight back to the house. Well, then, I'll try the other way. And so she did, wandering up and down and trying turn after turn, but always coming back to the house. Do what she would. Indeed, once when she turned a corner rather more quickly than usual, she ran against it before she could stop herself. It's no use talking about it, Alice said, looking up at the house and pretending it was arguing with her. I'm not going in again yet. I know I should have to get through the looking glass again, back into the old room, and there'd be an end of all my adventures. So resolutely turning her back upon the house, she set out once more down the path, determined to keep straight until she got to the hill. For a few minutes all went on well, and she was just saying, I really shall do it this time, when the path gave a sudden twist and shook itself, as she described it afterwards, and the next moment she found herself actually walking in at the door. Oh, it's too bad, she cried. I never saw such a house for getting in the way, never. However, there was the hill full in sight, so there was nothing to be done but start again. This time she came upon a large flower bed with a border of daisies and the willow tree growing in the middle. Oh, tiger lily, said Alice, addressing herself to the one that was waving gracefully about in the wind. I wish you could talk. So Alice in Wonderland, this was in the Disney movie, right? So Alice in Wonderland, the Disney movie, is a mishmash of these two stories. We can talk, said the tiger lily, when there's anybody worth talking to. Alice was so astonished that she couldn't speak for a minute. It quite seemed to take her breath away. At length, as the tiger lily only went on waving about, she spoke again in a timid voice, almost in a whisper. And can all flowers talk? As well as you can, said the tiger lily, and a great deal louder. Isn't it manners for us to begin, said Rose. It isn't manners for us to begin, said the rose, and I really was wondering when you'd speak, said I to myself. Her face has got some sense in it, though it's not a clever one. Still, you're the right color, and that goes a long way. I don't care about the color, the tiger lily remarked. If only her petals curled up a little more, she'd be all right. Alice didn't like being criticized, so she began asking questions. Aren't you sometimes frightened at being planted out here with nobody to take care of you? There's a tree in the middle, said the rose. What else is it good for? But what could it do if any danger came? Alice asked. It could bark, said the rose. It says bow wow, cried the daisy. That's why its branches are called boughs. Didn't you know that? Cried another daisy, and here they all began shouting together, till the air seemed quite full of little shrill voices. Silence, every one of you! Cried the tiger lily, waving itself passionately from side to side, and trembling with excitement. They know I can't get at them, it panted, bending its quivering head towards Alice, or they wouldn't dare to do it. We do have another picture, though. There we go. Never mind, Alice said in a soothing tone, and stooping down to the daisies, who were just beginning again, she whispered, If you don't hold your tongues, I'll pick you. There was a silence in a moment, and several of pink daisies turned white. That's right, said the tiger lily. The daisies are worst of all. When one speaks, they all begin together, and it's enough to make one wither to hear the way they go on. How is it you can all talk so nicely? Alice said, hoping to get it into a better temper by a compliment. I've been in many gardens before, but none of the flowers could talk. Put your hand down and feel the ground, said the tiger lily. Then you'll know why. Alice did so. It's very hard, she said, but I don't see what that has to do with it. In most gardens, Tiger Lily said, they make the beds too soft and so that the flowers are always asleep. This sounded a very good reason, and Alice was quite pleased to know it. I never thought of that before, she said. It's my opinion that you never think at all, the rose said in a rather severe tone. I never saw anybody that looked stupider, the violet said so suddenly that Alice quite jumped, for it hadn't spoken before. Damn. All the crap talking. Hold your tongue, cried the tiger lily, as if you ever saw anybody. You keep your head under the leaves and snore away there. Till you know no more what's going on in the world than if you were a bud. Are there any more people in the garden besides me? Alice said, not choosing to notice the rose's last remark. There's one other flower in the garden that can move about like you, said the rose. I wonder how you do it. You're always wondering, said the tiger lily. But she's more bushy than you are. Is she like me? Asked Alice asked eagerly, for the thought crossed her mind. There's another little girl in the garden somewhere. Well, she has the same awkward shape as you, the rose said, but she's redder and her petals are shorter, I think. They're done up close like a dahlia, said the tiger lily, not tumbled about like yours. That's not your fault, the rose added kindly. You're beginning to fade, you know, and then one can't help one's petals getting a little untidy. Alice didn't like this idea at all, so to change the subject, she asked, Does she ever come out here? I dare say you'll see her soon, said the rose. She's one of the kind that has 9 spikes, you know. Where does she wear them? Alice asked with some curiosity. Why, all around her head, of course, the rose replied. I was wondering you hadn't got some too. I thought it was the regular rule. She's coming, cried the larkspur. I hear her footsteps, thump, thump, along the gravel walk. Alice looked around eagerly and found that it was the Red Queen. She's grown a good deal, was her first remark. She had indeed. When Alice first found her in the ashes, she had been only 3 inches high, and here she was, half a head taller than Alice herself. It's the fresh air that does it, said the rose. Wonderfully fine air it is out here. I think I'll go and I'll meet her, said Alice, for though the flowers were interesting enough, she felt that it would be far grander to have a talk with the real queen. Can't possibly do that, said the rose. I should advise you to walk the other way. This sounded nonsense to Alice. She said nothing, but set off at once towards the Red Queen. To her surprise, she lost sight of her in a moment and found herself walking in at the front door again. A little provoked, she drew back, and after looking everywhere for the Queen, whom she spied out at last a long way off, she thought she would try the plan this time of walking in the opposite direction. It succeeded beautifully. She had not been walking a minute before she found herself face to face with the Red Queen, and full in sight of the hill she had been so long aiming at. Where do you come from? Said the Red Queen. And where are you going? Look up, speak nicely, and don't twiddle your fingers all the time. Alice attended to all these directions and explained as well as she could that she had lost her way. I don't know what you mean by your way, said the Queen. All the ways about here belong to me, but why did you come out here at all? She added in a kinder tone. Curtsy when you're thinking what to say. It saves time. Alice wondered a little at this, but she was too much in awe of the Queen to disbelieve it. I'll try it when I go home, she thought to herself. The next time, and I'm a little late for dinner. It's time for you to answer now, the Queen said, looking at her watch. Open your mouth a little wider when you speak, and always say, Your Majesty. I only wanted to see what the garden was like, Your Majesty. That's right, said the Queen, patting her on the head, which Alice didn't like at all. Though when you say garden, I've seen gardens compared with which this would be a wilderness. Alice didn't dare to argue the point, but went on. And I thought I'd try to find my way to the top of that hill. When you say hill, the Queen interrupted, I could show you hills in comparison with which you'd call that a valley. No, I shouldn't, said Alice, surprised into contradicting her at last. A hill can't be a valley, you know. That would be a nonsense. The red queen shook her head. You may call it nonsense if you like, she said, but I've heard nonsense compared with that would be as sensible as a dictionary. Alice curtsied again. She was afraid from the queen's tone that she was a little offended, and they walked on in silence till they got to the top of the little hill. For some minutes, Alice stood without speaking, looking out in all directions over the country, and a most curious country it was. There were a number of tiny little brooks running straight across it from side to side, and the ground between was divided up into squares by a number of little green hedgehogs that reached from brook to brook. I declare it's marked out just like a large chessboard, Alice said at last. There ought to be some men moving about somewhere. And so there are, she added in a tone of delight, and her heart began to beat quick with excitement as she went on. It's a great huge game of chess that's being played all over the world. If this is the world at all, you know. Oh, what fun it is. How I wish I was one of them. I wouldn't mind being a pawn, if only I might join, though of course I should like to be a queen, best. She glanced rather shyly at the real queen as she said this, but her companion only smiled pleasantly and said, That's easily managed. You can be the white queen's pawn, if you like, as Lily's too young to play, and you're in second square to begin with. When you get to the eighth square, you'll be a queen. Just at this moment, somehow or other, they began to run. Alice never could quite make out, in thinking it over afterwards, how it was that they began. All she remembers is that they were running hand in hand, and the queen went so fast that it was all she could do to keep up with her. And still the queen kept crying, Faster, faster! But Alice felt she could not go faster, though she had no breath left to say so. The most curious part of the thing was that the trees and the other things round them never changed their places at all. However fast they went, they never seemed to pass anything. I wonder if all the things move along with us, thought poor puzzled Alice. And the queen seemed to guess her thoughts, for she cried, Faster! Don't try to talk! Not that Alice had any idea of doing that. She felt as if she would never be able to talk again. She was getting so much out of breath, and still the queen cried, Faster! Faster! And dragged her along. Are we nearly there? Alice managed to pant out at last. Nearly there, the queen repeated. Why, we passed it 10 minutes ago. Faster! And they ran out for a time in silence, with the wind whistling in Alice's ears and almost blowing her hair off in her head. Uh, Alice's ears and almost blowing her hair off her head, she fancied. Getting too distracted reading. Okay, so there's the checkerboard world chat. Mm-mm-mm. And down there at the bottom, there's a whole world full of chess game going on. And here, the queen running with Alice. They're on their way. Faster, faster. Alice, this is hair almost blowing off her head. They're going so quickly. Like the wind, sprinting like the wind. Now, now, cried the queen. Faster, faster! And they went so fast that at last they seemed to skim through the air, hardly touching the ground with their feet, till suddenly, just as Alice was getting quite exhausted, they stopped, and she found herself sitting on the ground, breathless and giddy. The queen propped her up against a tree and said kindly, You may rest a little now. Alice looked around her in great surprise. Why, I do believe we've been under this tree the whole time. Everything's just as it was. Of course it is, said the queen. What would you have it? Well, in our country, said Alice, still panting a little, you generally get to somewhere else if you ran very fast for a long time, as we've been doing. A slow sort of country, said the queen. Now here you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. I'd rather not try, please, said Alice. I'm quite content to stay here, only I'm so hot and thirsty. I know what you'd like, the queen said good-naturedly, taking a little box out of her pocket. Have a biscuit. Alice thought it would not be civil to say no, though it wasn't at all what she had wanted. So she took it and ate it as well as she could, and it was very dry, and she thought she had never been so nearly choked in all her life. While you're refreshing yourself, said the queen, I'll just take the measurements, and she took a ribbon out of her pocket, marked in inches, and began measuring the ground and sticking little pegs in here and there. At the end of 2 yards, she said, putting in a peg to mark the distance, I shall give you your directions. Have another biscuits? No, thank you, said Alice. One's quite enough. Thirst quenched, I hope, said the queen. Alice did not know what to say to this, but luckily the queen did not wait for an answer, but went on. At the end of 3 yards I shall repeat them, for fear of you forgetting them. And at the end of 4 I shall say goodbye, and at the end of 5 I shall go. She had got all the pegs put down by this time, and Alice looked on with great interest as she returned to the tree, and they began slowly walking down the row. As the 2 yard peg At the 2 yard peg, she faced round and said, A pawn goes 2 squares in its first move, you know. So you'll go very quickly through the third square, by railway, I should think, and you'll find yourself in the fourth square in no time. Well, that square belongs to Tweedledum and Tweedledee. The fifth is mostly water. The sixth belongs to Humpty Dumpty, but you make no remark. I didn't know I had to make one just then, Alice faltered out. You should have said, the queen went on in a tone of grave reproof. It's extremely kind of you to tell me this. However, well, suppose it said, the seventh square is all forest. However, one of the knights will show you the way, and in the eighth square we shall be queens together. And it's all feasting and fun. Alice got up and curtsied and sat down again. At the next peg, the queen turned again, and this time she said, speak in French when you can't think of English for a thing. Turn out your toes as you walk, and remember who you are. She did not wait for Alice to curtsy this time, but walked on quickly to the next peg, where she turned for a moment to say, goodbye, then hurried on to the last. How it happened, Alice never knew, but exactly as she came to the last peg, she was gone. Whether she vanished into the air or whether she quickly ran into the wood, and she can run very fast, thought Alice. There was no way of guessing, but she was gone, and Alice began to remember that she was a pawn and that it would soon be time for her to move. Interesting. So this is Alice in a chess game. Chapter 3, Looking Glass Insects. Of course, the first thing to do was to make a grand survey of the country she was going to travel through. It's something very like learning geography, thought Alice as she stood on tiptoe in hopes of being able to see a little further. Principal rivers, there are none. Principal mountains, I'm on the only one, but I don't think it's got any name. Principal towns, why, what are those creatures making honey down there? They can't be bees. Nobody ever saw bees a mile off, you know. And for some time she stood silent, watching one of them that was bustling amo- watching one of them that was bustling about among the flowers, poking its proboscis into them, just as if it was a regular bee, thought Alice. However, this was anything but a regular bee. In fact, it was an elephant, as Alice soon found out, though the idea quite took her breath away at first. And what enormous flowers they must be, was her next idea. Something like cottages with roofs taken off and stalks put to them. And what quantities of honey they must make. I think I'll go down and. No, I won't go just yet, she went on, checking herself as she was beginning to run down the hill and trying to find some excuse for turning shy so suddenly. It'll never do to go down among them without a good long branch to brush them away. And what fun it'll be when they ask me how I liked my walk. I shall say, "Oh, I liked it well enough." Here came the favorite little toss of the head. Only it was so dusty and hot, and the elephants did tease so. I think I'll go down the other way, she said after a pause, and perhaps I may visit the elephants later on. Besides, I do so want to get into the third square. So with this excuse, she ran down the hill and jumped over the first of the six little brooks. Tickets, please, said the guard, putting his head in at the window. In a moment, everybody was holding out a ticket. They were about the same size as the people, and quite seemed to fill the carriage. Now then, show your ticket, child, the guard went on, looking angrily at Alice. And a great many voices all said together, like a chorus of a song, thought Alice. Don't keep him waiting, child. Why, his time is worth £1,000 a minute. I'm afraid I haven't got one, said Alice in a frightened tone. There wasn't a ticket office where I came from. And again the chorus of voices went on. There wasn't room for one where she came from. The land there was worth £1,000 an inch. Don't make excuses, said the guard. You should have bought one from the engine driver. And once more the chorus of voices went on with the man that drives the engine. Why, the smoke alone is worth £1,000 a puff. Alice thought to herself, then there's no use in speaking. The voices didn't join in this time, as she hadn't spoken. But to her great surprise, they all thought in chorus. I hope you understand what thinking in chorus means, for I must confess that I don't. Better say nothing at all. Language is worth £1,000 a word. I shall dream about £1,000 tonight. I know I shall, thought Alice. All this time the guard was looking at her, first through a telescope, then through a microscope, and then through an opera glass. At last he said, You're traveling the wrong way, and shut up the window and went away. I think that's him looking at her. Looks like there's like a goat, and there's a guy with like a hat that he made that like out of paper. He folded up a hat for himself out of paper. So young a child, said the gentleman sitting opposite to her. He was dressed in a white paper. Oh yeah, that is exactly what it was. Ought to know which way she's going, even if she doesn't know her own name. A goat was sitting next to the gentleman in white, shut his eyes, and said in a loud voice, She ought to know her way to the ticket office, even if she doesn't know her alphabet. There was a beetle sitting next to the goat. It was a very queer carriage full of passengers altogether. And as the rule seemed to be that they should all speak in turn, he went on with, She'll have to go back from here as luggage. Alice couldn't see who was sitting beyond the beetle, but a hoarse voice spoke next. Change engines, it said, and there choked and was obliged to leave off. Sounds like a horse, Alice thought to herself, and in an extremely small voice close to her ear said, "You might make a joke on that. Something about horse and horse, you know." Then a very gentle voice in the distance said, "She must be labeled last with care, you know." And after that, other voices went on. "What a number of people there are in the carriage," thought Alice, saying, "She must go by post, as she's got a hat on her. She must be sent as a message by the telegraph. She must draw the train herself the rest of the way," and so on. But the gentleman dressed in white paper leaned forwards and whispered in her ear, "Never mind what they all say, my dear, but take a return ticket every time the train stops." "Indeed, I shan't," Alice said rather impatiently. "I don't belong to this railway journey at all. I was in a wood just now, and I wish I could get back there." "You might make a joke on that," said the little voice close to her ear. "Something about you would if you could, you know." "Don't tease so," said Alice, looking about in vain to see where that voice came from. "If you're so anxious to have a joke made, why don't you make one yourself?" The little voice sighed deeply. It was very unhappy, evidently, and Alice would have said something pitying to comfort it. It would only sigh like other people, she thought, but this was such a wonderfully small sigh that she wouldn't have heard it at all if it hadn't come quite close to her ear. The consequence of this was that it tickled her ear very much, and quite took off her thoughts from the unhappiness of the poor little creature. "I know you are a friend," the little voice went on, "a dear friend and an old friend, and you won't hurt me, though I am an insect." "What kind of insect?" Alice inquired a little anxiously. What she really wanted to know was whether it could sting or not, but she thought this wouldn't be quite a civil question to ask. "What? Then you don't?" the little voice began, when it was drowned by a shrill scream from the engine, and everybody jumped up in alarm, Alice amongst the rest. The horse, who had put his head out of the window, quietly drew it in and said, "It's only a brook we have to jump over." Everybody seemed satisfied with this, though Alice felt a little nervous at the idea of trains jumping at all. "However, it'll take us into the fourth square. There's some comfort," she said to herself. In another moment, she felt the carriage rise straight up into the air, and in a fright, she caught at the thing nearest to her hand, which happened to be the goat's beard. Bam, bam, bam. But the beard seemed to melt away as she touched it, and she found herself sitting quietly under a tree, while the gnat, for that was the insect she had been talking to, was balancing itself on a twig just over her head and fanning her with its wings. It was certainly a very large gnat, about the size of a chicken, Alice thought. Still, she couldn't feel nervous with it after they had been talking together so long. "Then you don't like all insects," the gnat went on as quietly as if nothing had happened. "I like them when they can talk," Alice said. "None of them ever talk where I come from." "What sort of insects do you rejoice in? Where do you come from?" the gnat inquired. "I don't rejoice in insects at all," Alice explained, "because I'm rather afraid of them, at least the large kinds, but I can tell you the names of some of them." "Of course they answer to their names," the gnat remarked carelessly. "I've never knew them to do it." "What's the use of having names," said the gnat, "if they won't answer to them?" That do be the gnat. "No use to them," said Alice, "but it's useful to people that name them, I suppose. If not, why do things have names at all?" "I can't say," the gnat replied. "Further on in the wood down there, they've got no names. However, go on with your list of insects. You're wasting time." "Well, there's the horsefly." "Oh, that's what that is. That's the horsefly." Alice began, counting off the names on her fingers. "All right," said the gnat. "Halfway up that bush, you'll see a rocking horse fly. If you look, it's made entirely of wood and gets about by swinging itself from branch to branch." "So what does it live on?" Alice asked with great curiosity. "Sap and sawdust," said the gnat. "Go on with the list." Alice looked at the rocking horse fly with great interest and made up her mind that it must have been just repainted. It looked so bright and sticky. And then she went on. "And then there's the dragonfly." "That's the dragonfly, I do believe." "Look on the branch above your head," said the gnat, "and there you'll find a snap dragonfly. Its body is made of plum pudding, its wings of holly leaves, and its head is a raisin burning in brandy." "And what does it live on?" Alice asked as before. "Frumenty and mince pie," the gnat replied, "and it makes its nest in a Christmas box." "And then there's the butterfly," Alice went on, after she had taken a good look at the insect with its head on fire. "Oh, that's what its head's on fire. That's what the smoking is. Okay, I see." And had thought to herself, "I wonder if that's the reason insects are so fond of flying into candles, because they want to turn into snapdragonflies." Crawling at your feet, said the gnat. Alice drew her feet back in some alarm. You may observe a bread and butterfly. Its wings are thin slices of bread and butter, and its body is a crust, and its head is a lump of sugar. That's the next one. Disgusting. Although maybe it does taste good. Who knows? Sorry, chat. I'm just getting a little. All right, so what had happened, chat? I ran out of the black tea, so right now I'm drinking the peach ginger turmeric, which is a herbal tea, which herbal teas generally make you sleepy. I need to go and get some more of like anything. Earl Grey is usually what I go for, but there, I really like that rose tea. That rose petal tea is so tasty. So I'll likely get some more of that. But for now, this tea is very tasty, but it's kind of sleepy time. I don't know how much longer we're gonna actually go for reading here. Maybe we'll do like two more chapters. We got Tweedledum, Tweedledee coming up. I think we can get through like chapter 5, and then Humpty Dumpty's chapter 6. We'll probably leave that. Okay, sounds like a plan. Okay, good talk, chat. And then I think tomorrow I'll start a bit earlier, and I believe that we'll be able to get through the rest of the entire book. Yeah, because the next time that I'll get to like just be able to do like an entire book all in one go is not going to be till next Thursday or Friday. So we're going to be doing, yeah, we're doing these streams. We'll do these books in parts just so that we can keep on going, getting not lose any momentum here. Make sure that we're putting out the content. Mm-mm-mm-mm. After this one, we're reading Flatland, and then I have a bunch of other books over here that a friend of mine lent me. I think we could probably go with Dark Tower. It's a little more mature. There's some like some adult content, but Stephen King, the, the Gunslinger, the first book of the Dark Tower. I think this is what we're going for next, probably. I also need to get Hardy Boys books and also Taylor Swift. Definitely doing those. But this is one of my favorite book series, the Dark Tower series. Mm-hmm. So I look forward to going through that with you guys. Definitely. After this, Alice was silent for a minute or two, pondering. The gnat amused itself, meanwhile, by humming round and round her head. At last it settled again and remarked, I suppose you don't want to lose your name. No, indeed, Alice said a little anxiously. Remember, the queen, the Red Queen, told her to remember who she was. And yet, I don't know, the gnat went on in a careless tone. Only think how convenient it would be if you could manage to go home without it. For instance, if the governess wanted to call you to your lessons, she would call out, Come here! And there she would have to leave off because there wouldn't be any name for her to call. And of course, you wouldn't have to go, you know. That would never do, I'm sure, said Alice. The governess would never think of excusing me lessons for that. If she couldn't remember my name, she called me Miss, as the servants do. Well, if she said miss and didn't say anything more, the gnat remarked, of course you'd miss your lessons. That's a joke. I wish you had made it. Why do you wish I had made it? Alice asked. It's a very bad one. But the gnat only sighed deeply, while the two large tears came rolling down its cheeks. You shouldn't make jokes, Alice said, if it makes you so unhappy. Then came another of those melancholy little sighs. This time, the poor gnat really seemed to have sighed itself away, for when Alice looked up, there was nothing whatever to be seen on the twig, and as she was getting quite chilly with sitting still so long, she got up and walked on. She very soon came upon an open field with a wood on the other side of it. It looked much darker than the last wood, and Alice felt a little timid about going into it. However, on second thoughts, she made up her mind to go in. For I certainly won't go back, she thought to herself, this and this was the only way to the eighth square. This must be the wood, she said thoughtfully to herself, where things have no names. I wonder what'll become of my name when I go in. I shouldn't like to lose it at all, because they'd have to give me another, and it would be almost certain to be an ugly one. But then the fun would be trying to find the creature that had got my old name. There's just there's That's just like the advertisements, when people lose dogs. Answers to the name of Dash had on a brass collar. Just fancy calling everyone you met Alice till one of them answered. Only they wouldn't answer at all if they were wise. She was rambling on in this way when she reached the wood. It looked very cool and shady. Well, at any rate, it's great comfort, she said as she stepped under the trees. After it being so hot, to get into what? She went on, rather surprised at not being able to think of the word. I mean, to get under this, putting her hand on the trunk of the tree. What does it call itself? I wonder. I do believe it's got no name. Why, to be sure, it hasn't. She stood silent for a minute, thinking. Then she suddenly began again. Then it really has happened, after all. And now, who am I? I will remember if I can. I'm determined to do it. But being determined didn't help her much. And all she could say, after a great deal of puzzling, was L. I know it begins with an L. Just then a fawn came wandering by. Just then. It looked at Alice with its large, gentle eyes, but didn't seem frightened at all. Here then, here then, Alice said as she held out her hand and tried to stroke it, but only started back a little and then stood looking at her again. What do you call yourself? The fawn said at last, such a soft, sweet voice it had. I wish I knew, thought poor Alice. She answered rather sadly, Nothing, just now. Think again, it said. That won't do. Alice thought, but nothing came of it. Please, would you tell me what you call yourself? She said timidly. I think that might help a little. I'll tell you if you'll come a little further on, the fawn said. I can't remember here. They walked on together through the wood, Alice with her arms clasped lovingly round the soft neck of the fawn, till they came out into another open field, and here the fawn gave a sudden bound into the air, and shook itself free from Alice's arms. I'm a fawn, it cried in a voice of delight, and dear me, you're a human child, and a sudden look of alarm came into its beautiful brown eyes, and in another moment it had darted away at full speed. Alice stood looking after it, almost ready to cry with vexation at having lost her dear little fellow traveler so suddenly. However, I know my name now, she said. That's some comfort. Alice. Alice. I won't forget it again. And now, which of these finger posts ought I to follow, I wonder? It was not a very difficult question to answer, as there was only one road through the wood, and the two finger posts both painted along it. And the two finger posts both pointed along it. I'll settle it, Alice said to herself. When the road divides and they point different ways. But this did not seem likely to happen. She went on and on a long way, but wherever the road divided, there were sure to be two finger posts pointing the same way. One marked to Tweedledum's house, the other to the house of Tweedledee. I do believe, said Alice at last, that they live in the same house. I wonder, I had never thought of that before, but I can't stay there long. I'll just call and say, How do you do? And ask them the way out of the wood. If I could only get to the eighth square before it gets dark. So she wandered on, talking to herself as she went, till, on turning a sharp corner, she came upon two little fat men so suddenly that she could not help starting back. But in another moment she recovered herself, feeling sure that they must be. Chapter 4. Tweedledum and Tweedledee. They were standing under a tree, each with an arm round the other's neck, and Alice knew which was which in a moment, because one of them had "dumb" embroidered on his collar, and the other had "D." I suppose they've got each. I suppose they've each got Tweedle round the back of the collar, she said to herself. They stood so still that she quite forgot they were alive, and she was just going round to see if the word Tweedle was written on the back of each collar when she was startled by a voice coming from the one marked "dumb." If you think where wax works, he said, you ought to pay. You know, wax works weren't made to be looked at for nothing. No, no how. Contrariwise, added the one marked by D, if you think we're alive, if you think we're alive, you ought to speak. I'm sure I'm very sorry, was all Alice could say, for the words of the old song kept ringing through her head like the ticking of a clock, and she could hardly help saying them out loud. Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed to have a battle, for Tweedledum and Tweedledee had spoiled his nice new rattle. Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed to have a battle, for Tweedledum said Tweedledee had spoiled his nice new rattle. Just then flew down a monstrous crow as black as a tar barrel, which frightened both the heroes so they quite forgot their quarrel. I mean, I guess you have to you have to rhyme quarrel with barrel, barrel quarrel. I now I know what you're thinking about, said Tweedledum, but it isn't so, no how. Contrariwise, continued Tweedledee, if it was so, it might be, and if it were so, it would be. But as it isn't, it ain't. That's logic. I was thinking, Alice said politely, which is the best way out of this woods? It's getting so dark. Would you tell me, please? But the fat little men only looked at each other and grinned. They looked so exactly like a couple of great schoolboys that Alice couldn't help but pointing a finger at Tweedledum and saying, First boy, no how, Tweedledum cried out briskly and shut his mouth up again with a snap. Next boy, said Alice, passing on to Tweedledee, though she felt quite certain he would only shout out, Contrariwise, and so he did. You've begun wrong, cried Tweedledum. The first thing in a visit is to say, How do you do? And shake hands. And here the two brothers gave each other a hug, and then they held out the two hands that were free to shake hands with her. Alice did not like shaking hands with either of them first, for fear of hurting the other one's feelings. So, as the best way out of the difficulty, she took hold of both hands at once. The next moment, they were dancing round in a ring. This seemed quite natural, she remembered afterwards, as she was not even surprised to hear the music playing. It seemed to come from the tree under which they were dancing, and it was done as well as she could make it out by the branches rubbing one across the other like fiddles and fiddlesticks. But it certainly was funny, Alice said afterwards, when she was telling her sisters the history of all of this, to find myself singing, Here we go round the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush, here we go round the mulberry. How's that song go? I don't even remember, damn it. I don't know when it began, but somehow it felt as I'd been singing for a long time. The other two dancers were fat and very soon out of breath. 4 times round is enough for one dance, Tweedledum panted out, and they left off dancing as suddenly as they had begun. The music stopped at the same moment. Then they let go of Alice's hands and stood looking at her for a minute. There was a rather awkward pause, as Alice didn't know how to begin a conversation with people she had just been dancing with. It would never do to say, How do you do now? She said to herself. We seem to have got beyond that somehow. I hope you're not much tired, she said at last. No, how, and thank you very much for asking, said Tweedledum. So much obliged, added Tweedledee. You like poetry? Yes, pretty well, some poetry, Alice said doubtfully. Would you tell me which road leads out of the wood? What shall I repeat to her? Said Tweedledee, looking round at Tweedledum with great solemn eyes, and not noticing Alice's question. The walrus and the carpenter is the longest, Tweedledum replied, giving his brother an affectionate hug. Tweedledee began instantly. The longest one, of course. The sun was shining. Here Alice ventured to interrupt him. If it's very long, she said as politely as she could, would you please tell me first which road? Tweedledee smiled gently and began again. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be, the sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead, there were no birds to fly. The walrus and the carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. Oh, damn it. Okay, so there's Tweedledum and Tweedledee. I apologize. There you go. We'll take a second. Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Their armed arms around each other's necks. If they were only cleared away, they said it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept for half a year, do you suppose the walrus said that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. Oh, oysters, come and walk with us, the walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4, and thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. See, chat, when I was doing this, recording it, I was just repeating the same things over, trying to get it down perfectly. It's a little more casual, like doing it this way. I suppose we could go and, do the editing, cut, 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 and make it all perfect. But I don't know if I'm gonna be doing that. Probably not. If that's what you guys prefer, though, please do indeed let me know. I would like to be doing things that you enjoy. Honestly, I'm having fun just reading these books. But yeah, maybe you'd prefer if I went. Maybe you would prefer if I went through the entire story at least a couple of times first, and like stop effing up every 2 seconds. I don't know. What do you think, chat? What do you want? I'm fine reading a book for the first time and encountering everything with you. Like Dark Tower is not gonna be the first time, but it's gonna be the first time in a long time that I've read it. So, some things will be a little fresh, right? To be re-uncovered. Mm-mm-mm. But feedback, please, please, please leave some feedback. I would definitely love to know ways to improve what you guys are all thinking. Uh, uh, um, and here we go. And those are the oysters following the carpenter and the walrus. The walrus and the carpenter walked a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low. And all the little oysters stood and waited in a row. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot and whether pigs have wings. But wait a bit, the oysters cried, before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the carpenter. They thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar, besides, are very good indeed. Now, if you're ready, oysters, dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cried, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do. The night is fine, the walrus said. Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very. It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice. The carpenter said nothing but, cut, cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I had to ask you twice. Seems a shame, the walrus said, to play them such a trick, after we've brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The carpenter said nothing but, the butter is spread too thick. I weep for you, the walrus said. I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears he sorted out, those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. Oh, oysters, said the carpenter, you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again? But the answers came there none. And this was scarcely odd because they'd eaten every one. Poor guys. Yeah, that one I remember that. This is in the Alice in Wonderland movie by Disney. So yeah, it seems that they mishmashed these two stories together because the ending of Alice in Wonderland, her playing croquet with the Red Queen, has also been added to that movie. film. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Mm-mm-mm. I like the walrus best, said Alice, because he was a little sorry for the poor. Oh my god. I like the walrus best, said Alice, because he was a little sorry for the poor oysters. He loved the oysters. He ate them up. He ate more than the carpenter, though, said Tweedledee. You see, he held his handkerchief in front so that the carpenter couldn't count how many he took, contrariwise. That was mean, Alice said indignantly. Then I like the carpenter best, if he hadn't eaten so many as the walrus. But he ate as many as he could get, said Tweedledum. This was a puzzler. After a pause, Alice began. Well, they were both very unpleasant characters. Here she checked herself in some alarm at hearing something that sounded to her like the puffing of a large steam engine in the wood near them, though she feared it was more likely to be a wild beast. Are there any lions or tigers about here? She asked timidly. It's only the Red King snoring, said Tweedledee. Come and look at him, the brothers cried, and they each took one of Alice's hands and led her up to where the king was sleeping. Isn't he a lovely sight? Said Tweedledum. Alice couldn't say honestly that he was. He was a tall red night. He had a tall red nightcap on with a tassel, and he was lying crumpled up into a sort of untidy heap and snoring loudly. Fit to snore his head off, as Tweedledum remarked. The next one. That do be him. I'm afraid he'll catch cold with lying on the damp grass, said Alice, who was a very thoughtful little girl. He's dreaming now, said Tweedledee, and what do you think he's dreaming about? Alice said, Nobody can guess that. Why, about you, Tweedledee exclaimed, clapping his hands triumphantly. And if he left off dreaming about you, where do you suppose you'd be? Where I am now, of course, said Alice. Not you, Tweedledee retorted contemptuously. You'd be nowhere. Why you're only a sort of thing in his dream. If that there king was to wake, added Tweedledum, you'd go out, bang, just like a candle. I shouldn't, Alice exclaimed indignantly. Besides, if I'm only a sort of thing in his dream, what are you, I should like to know? Ditto, said Tweedledum. Ditto, ditto, cried Tweedledee. So the hunting of the snark, you go out like a candle if it was a boojum. If it was a boojum, which it was a boojum, of course, and so what was it? The butcher? He was the butcher. He disappeared. I remember that. Yep. It's a snark was the sound of the first that was the sound that first came to their ears and seemed almost too good to be true. Then followed a torrent of laughter and cheers, then the ominous words, It's a boot! Then silence. Some fancied they heard in the air a weary and wandering sigh that sounded like jump, but the others declared it was only a breeze that went by. They hunted till darkness came on, but they found not a button or feather or mark by which they could tell that they stood on the ground where the baker had met with a snark. In the midst of the word he was trying to say, in the midst of his laughter and glee, he had softly and suddenly vanished away, for the snark was a boojum, you see. You think that the Red King is a boojum? Oh, you go out bang like a candle. No, okay, that's a different sort of disappearance. He shouted this so loud that Alice could. Okay, so they said ditto, said Tweedledum. Ditto, ditto, cried Tweedledee. They're all figments of this man's imagination. He shouted this so loud that Alice couldn't help saying, Hush, you'll be waking him. I'm afraid if you make so much noise. Well, it's no use your talking about waking him, said Tweedledum, when you're only one of the things in his dream. You know very well you're not real. I am real, said Alice, and began to cry. You won't make yourself a bit realer by crying, Tweedledee remarked. There's nothing to cry about. If I wasn't real, Alice said, half laughing through her tears, it all seems so ridiculous. I shouldn't be able to cry. I hope you don't suppose those are real tears, Tweedledum interrupted in a tone of great contempt. I don't know they're talking. I know they're talking nonsense, Alice thought to herself, and it's foolish to cry about it. So she brushed away her tears and went on as cheerfully as she could. At any rate, I'd better be getting out of the wood, for really it's coming on very dark. Do you think it's going to rain? Tweedledum spread a large umbrella over himself and his brother and looked up into it. No, I don't think it is, he said. At least not under here. No how. But it may rain outside? It may, if it chooses, said Tweedledee. We've no objection, contrariwise. Selfish things, thought Alice, and she was just going to say good night and leave them when Tweedledum sprang out from under the umbrella. He seized her by the wrist. Do you see that? He said in a voice choking with passion, and his eyes grew large and yellow all in a moment as he pointed with a trembling finger at a small white thing lying under the tree. It's only a rattle, Alice said, after a careful examination of the little white thing. Not a rattlesnake, you know, she added hastily, thinking that he was frightened. Only an old rattle, quite old and broken. I knew it was, cried Tweedledum, beginning to stamp about wildly and tear his hair. It's spoilt, of course. Here he looked at Tweedledee, who immediately sat down on the ground and tried to hide himself under the umbrella. Alice laid her hand upon his arm and said in a soothing tone, You needn't be so angry about an old rattle. But it isn't old, Tweedledum cried in a greater fury than ever. It's new, I tell you, I bought it yesterday. My nice new rattle, and his voice rose to a perfect scream. All this time Tweedledee was trying his best to fold up the umbrella with himself in it, which was such an extraordinary thing to do that it quite took off Alice's attention from the angry brother. But he couldn't quite succeed, and it ended up in his rolling over, bundled up in the umbrella with only his head out, and there he lay, opening and shutting his mouth and his large eyes, looking more like a fish than anything else. Alice thought. Of course you agreed to have a battle, Tweedledum said in a calmer tone. I suppose so, the other sulkily replied as he crawled out of the umbrella. Only she must help us to dress up, you know. So the two brothers went off hand in hand into the wood and returned in a minute with their arms full of things, such as bolsters, blankets, hearth rugs, tablecloths, dish covers, and coal scuttles. I hope you're a good hand at pinning and tying strings, Tweedledum remarked. Every one of these things has got to go on, somehow or other. Alice said afterwards she had never seen such a fuss made about anything in all her life. The way those two bustled about, and the quantity of things they put on, and the trouble they gave her in trying and the trouble they gave her in tying strings and fastening buttons. Really, they'll be more like bundles of old clothes than anything else by the time they're ready, she said to herself as she arranged a bolster around the neck of Tweedledee to keep his head from being cut off, as he said. You know, he added very gravely, it's one of the most serious things you can possibly that can possibly happen to one in a battle, to get one's head cut off. Alice laughed loud, but she managed to turn it to a cough for fear of hurting his feelings. Do I look very pale? Said Tweedledum, coming up to have his helmet tied on. He called it a helmet, though it certainly looked much more like a saucepan. Well, yes, a little, Alice replied gently. I'm very brave generally, he went on in a low voice. Only today I happen to have a headache. I've got a toothache, said Tweedledee, who had overheard the remark. I'm far worse than you. Then you'd better not fight today, said Alice, thinking it a good opportunity to make peace. We must have a bit of a fight, but I don't care about going on long, said Tweedledum. What's the time now? Tweedledee looked at his watch and said, 4:30. Let's fight till 6 and then have dinner, said Tweedledum. Very well, the other said, rather sadly. And she can watch us. Only you'd better not come very close, he added. I generally hit everything I can see when I get really excited. And I hit everything within reach, quoth Tweedledum, whether I can see it or not. Alice laughed. You must hit the trees pretty often, I should think, she said. Tweedledum looked round him with a satisfied smile. I don't suppose, he said, there'll be a tree left standing forever so far round by the time we've finished. And all about a rattle, said Alice, hoping to make them a little ashamed of fighting for such a trifle. I shouldn't have minded it so much, said Tweedledum, if it hadn't been a new one. I wish the monstrous crow would come, thought Alice. There's only one sword, you know, Tweedledum said to his brother, but you can have the umbrella. It's quite as sharp. Only we must begin quick. It's getting as dark as it can. And darker, said Tweedledee. Almost nighttime. Just what Alice was afraid of. It was getting dark so suddenly that Alice thought there must be a thunderstorm coming on. What a thick black cloud that is, she said, and how fast it comes. Why do I believe it's got wings? It's the crow! Tweedledum cried out in a shrill voice of alarm, and the two brothers took to their heels and were out of sight in a moment. Alice ran a little way into the wood and stopped under a large tree. It can never get at me here, she thought. It's far too large to squeeze itself in among the trees, but I wish it wouldn't flap its wings so. It makes quite a hurricane in the wood. Here's somebody's shawl being blown away. Chapter 5. Wool and Water. She caught the shawl as she spoke and looked about for the owner. And in another moment, the White Queen came running wildly through the wood, with both arms stretched out wide as if she were flying. And Alice very civilly went to meet her with the shawl. I'm very glad I happened to be in the way, Alice said as she helped to put on her shawl again. The White Queen only looked at her in a helpless, frightened sort of way and kept repeating something in a whisper to herself that sounded like bread and butter, and Alice felt that if there was to be any conversation at all, she must manage it herself. So she began rather timidly. Am I addressing the White Queen? Well, yes, if you call that a dressing, the Queen said. It isn't my notion of the thing at all. Alice thought it would never do to have an argument at the very beginning of the conversation, so she smiled and said, If your Majesty will only tell me what the right way to begin, I'll do it as well as I can. But I don't want it done at all, groaned the poor Queen. I've been addressing myself for the last 2 hours. It would have been all the better, as it seemed to Alice, if she had not it would have been all the better, as it seemed to Alice, if she had got someone else to dress her. So she was so dreadfully untidy. Every single thing's crooked, Alice thought to herself, and she's all over pins. May I put your shawl straight for you? She added aloud. I don't know what's the matter with it, the Queen said in a melancholy voice. It's out of temper, I think. I've pinned it here and I've pinned it there, but there's no pleasing it. It can't go straight, you know, if you pin it all on one side, Alice said as she gently put it right for her. And dear me, what a state your hair is in. The brush has got entangled in it, the Queen said with a sigh, and I lost my comb yesterday. Alice carefully released the brush and did her best to get the hair into order. Come, you look rather better now, she said after alerting most of the pins. But after altering most of the pins, but really you should have a lady's maid. I'm sure I'll take you with pleasure, the Queen said. 2 pence a week and jam every other day. Alice couldn't help laughing as she said, I don't want you to hire me, and I don't care for jam. It's very good jam, said the Queen. Well, I don't want any today, at any rate. Here's Alice helping the Queen out. Oh no! Okay, so that's her dressing up Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Dee 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 dee. Bum bum bum. Just so that you can enjoy the art. Okay, and then we move on. Here's Alice helping the Queen get herself fixed up. You couldn't have it if you did. You couldn't have it if you did want it, the Queen said. The rule is jam tomorrow and jam yesterday, but never jam today. It must come sometimes to jam today, Alice objected. No, it can't, said the Queen. It's jam every other day. Today isn't any other day, you know. I don't understand you, said Alice. It's dreadfully confusing. That's the effect of living backwards, the Queen said kindly. It always makes one a little giddy at first. Living backwards, Alice repeated in great astonishment. I've never heard of such a thing. But there's one great advantage in it. That's one's in it. That one's memory works both ways. I'm sure mine only works one way, Alice remarked. I can't remember things before they happen. It's a poor sort of memory that only works backwards, the Queen remarked. What sort of things do you remember best? Alice ventured to ask. Oh, things that happened the week after next, said the Queen. Oh, things that happened the week after next, the Queen replied in a careless tone. For instance, now, she went on, sticking a large piece of plaster on her finger, she spoke, there's the king's messenger. He's in prison now, being punished. The trial doesn't even begin till next Wednesday, and of course the crime comes last of all. Suppose he never commits the crime, said Alice. That'd be all the better, wouldn't it? Said the Queen, as she bound the plaster around her finger with a bit of ribbon. Alice felt there was no denying that. Of course, it would be all the better, she said, but it wouldn't be all the better his being punished. You're wrong there, at any rate, said the Queen. Were you ever punished? Only for faults, said Alice. And you were all the better for it, I know, the Queen said triumphantly. Yes, but then I hadn't done the things I was but then I had done the things I was punished for, said Alice. That makes all the difference. But if you hadn't done them, uh I think this is the king's messenger. You guys might recognize him. We're moving on because the picture is on the page. I was just deciding whether I was going to or not in my own mind, and we are. We did it. We did it, chat. We moved on. But that's the Mad Hatter, man. That's the Mad Hatter. I think that's the king's messenger. Yes, but then I had done the things I was punished for, said Alice. That makes all the difference. But if you hadn't done them, the Queen said, that would have been better still. Better and better and better. Her voice went higher with each better and better and better. Her voice went higher with each better till it got to a squeak at last. Better and better and better, or something like that, right? I think that's probably more accurate. Better. SpongeBob laugh. Alice was just beginning to say, "There's a mistake somewhere," when the queen began screaming so loud that she had to leave the sentence unfinished. "Oh, oh, oh," shouted the queen, shaking her hand about as if she wanted to shake it off. "Shake it off, shake it off. Oh, 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 shake it off." Oh, wow. They predicted Taylor Swift over here. "My finger's bleeding. Oh, 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 oh." She's more like, "Oh, oh, oh, oh." Her screams were so exactly like the whistle of a steam engine that Alice had to hold both her hands over her ears. "What is the matter?" she said as soon as there was a chance of making herself heard. "Have you pricked your finger?" "I haven't pricked it yet," the queen said, "but I soon shall." "Oh, oh, oh. Do you expect to do it?" Alice said, feeling very much inclined to laugh. "When I fasten my shawl again," the poor queen groaned out. The brooch will come undone directly." "Oh, oh." And as she said the words, the brooch flew open, and the queen clutched wildly at it and tried to clasp it again. "Take care," cried Alice. "You're holding it all crooked." She caught at the brooch, but it was too late. The pin had slipped, and the queen had pricked her finger. "That accounts for the bleeding, you see," she said to Alice with a smile. "Now you understand the way things happen here." But why don't you scream now?" Alice asked, holding her hands ready to put over her ears again. "Why, I've done all the screaming already," said the queen. What would be the good of having it all over again?" By this time it was getting light. "The crow must have flown away, I think," said Alice. "I'm glad it's gone. I thought it was the night coming on." "I wish I could manage to be glad," the queen said. "Only I never can remember the rule. You must be very happy living in this wood and be glad whenever you like." "Only it's so very lonely here," Alice said in a melancholy voice, and at the thought of her loneliness, two large tears came rolling down her cheeks. "Oh, don't go on like that," cried the poor queen, wringing her hands in despair. "Consider what a great girl you are. Consider what a long way you've come today. Consider what o'clock it is. Consider anything. Only don't cry." Alice could not help laughing at this, even in the midst of her tears. "Can you keep from crying by considering things?" she asked. "That's the way it's done," the queen said with great decision. "Nobody can do two things at once, you know. Let's consider your age to begin with. How old are you?" "I'm 7.5 exactly." "You needn't say exactly," the queen remarked. "I can believe it without that." "Now I'll give you something to believe. I'm just 101, 5 months and a day." "I can't believe that," said Alice. "Can't you?" the queen said in a pitying tone. "Try again. Draw a long breath and shut your eyes." Alice laughed. "There's no use trying," she said. "One can't believe impossible things." "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the queen. "When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day, or sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." There goes the shawl again. Brooch had come undone as she spoke, and in a sudden gust of wind blew the queen's shawl across the little brook. The queen spread out her arms again and went flying after it, and this time she succeeded in catching it for herself. "I've got it!" she cried in a triumphant tone. "Now you shall see me pin it on again, all by myself." "Then I hope your finger is better now," Alice said very politely, as she crossed the little brook after the queen. Wham, wham, wham. So they do these little uh they circles? No, they're little stars, yeah. To show every time that they go over one of the little brooks. "Oh, much better," cried the queen, but her voice rising into a "Oh, much better!" cried "Oh, much better!" How her voice rising into a squeak. "Oh, much better, much better, 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 better." The last word ended in a long bleat, so like a sheep that Alice quite started. She looked at the queen, who seemed to have suddenly wrapped herself up in wool. Alice rubbed her eyes and looked again. She couldn't make out what had happened at all. Was she in a shop? And was it really a sheep that was sitting on the other side of the counter? Rub as she would, she could make nothing more of it. She was in a little dark shop, leaning with her elbows on the counter, and opposite to her was an old sheep sitting in an armchair knitting, and every now and then leaving off to look at her through a great pair of spectacles. "What is it you want to buy?" the sheep said at last, looking up for a moment from her knitting. "I don't quite know yet," Alice said very gently. "I should like to look all around me first, if I might." You may look in front of you and on both sides if you like, said the sheep, but you can't look all round you unless you've got eyes at the back of your head. But these, as it happened, Alice had not got, so she contented herself with turning around, looking at the shelves as she came to them. The shop seemed to be full of all manner of curious things, but the oddest part of it all was that whenever she looked hard at any shelf to make out exactly what it had on it, that particular shelf quite was always quite empty, though the others round it were crowded as full as they could hold. Things flow about so here, she said at last in a very plaintive tone, after she had spent a minute or two vainly pursuing a large bright thing that looked sometimes like a doll and sometimes like a workbox, and was always in the shelf next above the one she was looking at. And this one is the most provoking of all. But I'll tell you what, she added as a sudden thought struck her. I'll follow it up to the very top shelf of it all. I'll puzzle it to go through the ceiling, I expect. But even this plan failed. The thing went through the ceiling as quietly as possible, as if it were quite used to it. Are you a child or a teetotum? The Are you a child or teetotum? The sheep said as she took up another pair of needles. You'll make me giddy soon if you go on turning round like that. She was now working with 14 pairs at once, and Alice couldn't help looking at her in great astonishment. How can she knit with so many? The puzzled child thought to herself. She gets more and more like a porcupine every minute. Can you row? The sheep asked, handing her a pair of knitting needles as she spoke. Yes, a little, but not on land and not with needles. Alice was beginning to say when suddenly the needles turned into oars in her hands, and she found that they were in a little boat gliding along between banks. So there was nothing for it but to do her best. Feather! Cried the sheep as she took up another pair of needles. This didn't sound like a remark that needed any answer, so Alice said nothing but pulled away. There was something very queer about the water, she thought, and every now and then the oars got fast in it and would hardly come out again. Feather, feather, the sheep cried again, taking more needles. You'll be catching a cab directly. Dear little crab, thought Alice. You'll be catching a crab. I said cab. You'll be catching a crab directly. Dear little crab, thought Alice. I should like that. Didn't you hear me say feather? The sheep cried angrily, taking up quite a bunch of needles. Indeed, I did, said Alice. You've said it very often and very loud. Please, where are the crabs? In the water, of course, said the sheep, sticking some of the needles into her hair, as the hands were full. Feather, I say. Why do you say feather so often? Alice asked at last, rather vexed. I'm not a bird. You are, said the sheep. You're a little goose. This offended Alice a little. Silly goose. So there was no more conversation for a minute or two, while the boat glided gently on, sometimes among beds of weeds, which made the oars stick fast in the water. Worse than ever, and sometimes under trees, but always with the same tall river banks frowning over their heads. Oh, please, there are some scented rushes, Alice cried in a sudden transport of delight. There really are, and such beauties. You need to say please to me about 'em," said said the sheep said without looking up from her knitting. I didn't put 'em there, and I'm not going to take 'em away. No, but I meant please, may we wait and pick some? Alice pleaded. If you don't mind stopping the boat for a minute. How am I to stop it? Said the sheep. If you leave off rowing, it'll stop of itself. The boat was left to drift down the stream as it would, till it glided gently in among the waving rushes, and then the little sleeves were carefully rolled up, and the little arms were plunged in elbow deep to get a hold of the rushes a good long way down before breaking them off. And for a while Alice forgot about the sheep and the knitting as she bent over the side of the boat with just the ends of her tangled hair dipping into the water, while with bright eager eyes she caught at one bunch after another of the darling scented rushes. I only hope the boat won't tipple over, she said to herself. Oh, what a lovely one! Only I couldn't quite reach it, and it certainly did seem a little provoking, almost as if it happened on purpose. She thought that though she managed to pick plenty of beautiful rushes as the boat glided by, there was always more lovely one that she couldn't reach. The prettiest are always further, she said at last with a sigh at the obstinacy of the rushes in growing so far off, as with flushed cheeks and dripping hair and hands she scrambled back into her place and began to arrange her newfound treasures. What mattered what mattered it to her just then that the rushes had begun to fade what mattered it to her just then that the rushes had begun to fade and to lose all their scent and beauty from the very moment that she picked them. Even real scented rushes, you know, last only a very little while. And these, being dream rushes, melted away almost like snow, as if they lay in heaps at her feet. But Alice hardly noticed this. There were so many other curious things to think about. They hadn't gone much farther before the blade of one of the oars got fast in the water and wouldn't come out again. So Alice explained it afterwards, and the consequence was that the handle of it caught her under the chin, and in spite of a series of little shrieks of "oh, oh, oh" from poor Alice, it swept her straight off the seat and down among the heaps of rushes. However, she wasn't a bit hurt, and was soon up again. The sheep went on with her knitting, and all the while, just as if nothing had happened. "That was a nice crab you caught," she remarked, as Alice got back into her place, very much relieved to find herself still in the boat. The sheep in the boats. There's Alice rowing. "Was it? I didn't see it," said Alice, peeping cautiously over the side of the boat into the dark water. I wish I had I wish it hadn't let go. I should so like to see a little crab to take home with me." But the sheep only laughed scornfully and went on with her knitting. "Are there many crabs here?" said Alice. "Crabs and all sorts of things," said the sheep. "Plenty of choice, only to make up your mind. Now, what do you want to buy?" "To buy," Alice echoed in a tone that was half astonished and half frightened, for the oars and the boat and the river had vanished all in a moment, and she was back again in the little dark shop. "I should like to buy an egg, please," she said timidly. "How do you sell them?" Tasty eggs. 5 pence, farthing for one, 2 pence for two, the sheep replied. "Then two are cheaper than one?" Alice said in a surprised tone, taking out her purse. "Only you must eat them both if you buy two," said the sheep. "Then I'll have one, please," said Alice, as she put the money down on the counter. She thought to herself, they mightn't be at all nice, you know. Sheep took the money and put it away in a box, and then she said, "I've never put things into people's hands. That would never do. You must get it for yourself." And so saying, she went off to the other end of the shop and set up the egg upright on a shelf. I wonder why it wouldn't do, thought Alice, as she groped her way among the tables and chairs. The shop was very dark towards the end. The egg seems to get further away the more I walk towards it. Let me see. Is this the chair? Why, it's got branches, I declare. How very odd to find trees growing here. And actually, here's the little brook. Well, this is the very queerest shop I ever saw. Brat, 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 crossing the brook. So she went on, wondering more and more at every step, and as everything turned into a tree the moment she came up to it, she quite expected the egg to do the same. Everything turned into a tree. Uh, uh, um. Okay. The next one is The Lion and the Unicorn. We'll go for one more chapter, chat, and then we'll call it a stream from there. We'll continue the rest of the book. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, this is chapter 6. There's 12 chapters. Tomorrow we'll start early and we'll finish the remainder of the book. I don't think we'll get to Flatland. We'll probably just finish Alice, but then we can do Flatland the day after, if anything, or we'll see how it goes. We'll see what we're feeling like. But yeah, one more chapter, chat. Here we go. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. As you can see, I'm starting to like slip up on my words. One of the reasons why I wanted to do like this as a fresh read. But yeah, you got to try things out, and we got to figure out if this is gonna be working. I think it can. I think this is perfectly fine. But like I said, I need your feedback, please, please. All right, enough begging. Hi. Chapter 6, Humpty Dumpty. However, the egg only got larger and larger and more human. When she had come within a few yards of it, she saw that it had eyes and a nose and a mouth. And when she had come close to it, she saw clearly that it was Humpty Dumpty himself. "It can't be anybody else," she said to herself. "I'm as certain of it as if his name were written all over his face. Might have been written 100 times easily on that enormous face." Humpty Dumpty was sitting with his legs crossed like a Turk on top of a high wall, such a narrow one that Alice quite wondered how he could keep his balance. And as his eyes were steadily fixed in the opposite direction, and he didn't take the least notice of her, she thought he must be a stuffed figure after all. "And how exactly like an egg he is," she said aloud, standing with her hands ready to catch him, for she was every moment expecting him to fall. "It's very provoking," Humpty Dumpty said after a long silence, looking away from Alice as he spoke. "To be called an egg. Very." "I said you looked like an egg, sir," Alice gently explained. "And some eggs are very pretty, you know," she added, hoping to turn her remark into some sort of compliment. "Some people," said Humpty Dumpty, looking away from her as usual, "have no more sense than a baby." Alice didn't know what to say to this. It wasn't at all like conversation, she thought, as he never said anything to her. In fact, his last remark was evidently addressed to a tree. So she stood and softly repeated to herself, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty in his place again. The last line is much too long for the poetry, she added almost out loud, forgetting that Humpty Dumpty would hear her. So here's a little bit of history. Apparently, the Humpty Dumpty was a cannon that was sitting on a high perch, and it got knocked down, and they were unable to put it back together again. It was it's about war. It's about cannon fires. At least that's what I learned. I think it was on YouTube short. Was it on Instagram? It may have been Instagram. It was something. It was one of those short form videos that taught me that. Don't stand chattering to yourself like that, Humpty Dumpty said, looking at her for the first time. But tell me your name and your business. My name is Alice, but it's a stupid name enough, Humpty Dumpty interrupted impatiently. What does it mean? Must a name mean something? Alice said doubtfully. Of course it must, Humpty Dumpty said with a short laugh. My name means the shape I am, and a good handsome shape it is too. With a name like yours, you might be any shape almost. Why do you sit out here all alone? Said Alice, not wishing to begin an argument. Why, because there's nobody with me, cried Humpty Dumpty. Did you think I didn't know the answer? Didn't know the answer to that? Ask another. Don't you think you'd be safer down on the ground? Alice went on, not with any idea of making another riddle, but simply in her good-natured anxiety for the queer creature. This wall is so very narrow. What tremendously easy riddles, you ask, Humpty Dumpty growled out. Of course I don't think so. Why, if ever I did fall off, which there's no chance of, but if I did, here he pursed up his lips and looked so solemn and grand that Alice could hardly help laughing. If I did fall, he went on, the king has promised me. Ah, you may turn pale if you like. You didn't think I was going to say that, did you? The king has promised me with his very own mouth to send all his horses and all his men, Alice interrupted, rather unwisely. Now I declare that's too bad, Humpty Dumpty cried, breaking into sudden passion. You've been listening at doors and behind trees and down chimneys, or you couldn't have known it. I haven't indeed, Alice said very gently. It's in a book. Ah, well, they may write such things in a book, Humpty Dumpty said in a calmer tone. That's what you call a history of England, that is. Now, take a good look at me. I'm one that has spoken to a king, I am. Mayhap you've never seen such another. And to show you I'm not proud, you may shake hands with me. And he grinned almost from ear to ear as he leant forward, and nearly as possible fell off the wall doing so, and offered Alice his hand. She watched him a little anxiously as she took it. If he smiled much more, the ends of his mouth might meet back, she thought. And then I don't know what would happen to his head. I'm afraid it would come off. And here he is. As you can see, his smile does go like pretty decent ways around his whole head. It would be like South Park Canadians. Don't kick the baby. Man, I'm old. South Park reference. Yes, all his horses and all his men, Humpty Dumpty went on. They'd pick me up again in a minute, they would. However, this conversation is going on a little too fast. Let's go back to the last remark, but one. I'm afraid I can't quite remember it, Alice said very politely. In that case, we shall start afresh, said Humpty Dumpty, and it's my turn to choose a subject. He talks about it just as if it was a game, thought Alice. So here's a question for you. How old did you say you were? Alice made a short calculation and said 7 years and 6 months. Wrong, Humpty Dumpty exclaimed triumphantly. You never said a word like it. I thought you meant how old are you, Alice explained. If I'd meant that, I'd have said it, said Humpty Dumpty. Alice didn't want to begin another argument, so she said nothing. 7 years and 6 months, Humpty Dumpty repeated thoughtfully. An uncomfortable sort of age. Now, if you'd asked my advice, I'd have said leave off at 7, but it's too late now. Damn, this guy. I'd never ask advice about growing, Alice said indignantly. Too proud, the other inquired. This guy's funny. Alice felt even more indignant at this suggestion. I mean, she said that one can't help growing older. One can't, perhaps, said Humpty Dumpty, but two can. With proper assistance, you might have left off at 7. With a beautiful, what a beautiful belt you've got on, Alice suddenly remarked. They had had quite enough of the subject of age, she thought, and if they were really to take turns in choosing subjects, it was her turn now. At least, she corrected herself on second thoughts. Beautiful cravats. I should have said, no, a belt, I mean. I beg your pardon, she added in dismay, for Humpty Dumpty looked thoroughly offended as she began to wish she hadn't chosen that subject. If only I knew, she thought to herself, which was neck and which was waist. Evidently, Humpty Dumpty was very angry, though she said nothing for a minute or two. When he did speak again, it was in a deep growl. So he's upset because she said it looks like a good belt, but it might have been like a necklace. A little hard to tell. Excuse me. It it is a most provoking thing, he said at last, when a person doesn't know a cravat from a belt. I know it's a very I know it's very ignorant of me, Alice said in so humble a tone that Humpty Dumpty relented. It's a cravat, child, and a beautiful one, as you say. It's a present from the White King and Queen. There now. It is really? Said Alice, quite pleased to find that she had chosen a good subject after all. They gave it to me, Humpty Dumpty continued thoughtfully as he crossed one knee over the other and clasped his hand round it. They gave it to me for an unbirthday present. I beg your pardon, Alice said with a puzzled air. I'm not offended, said Humpty Dumpty. I mean, what is an unbirthday present? A present given when it isn't your birthday, of course. Alice considered a little. I like birthday presents best, she said at last. You don't know what you're talking about, cried Humpty Dumpty. How many days are there in a year? 365, said Alice. And how many birthdays have you? One. If you take one from 365, what remains? 364, of course. Humpty Dumpty looked doubtful. I'd rather see that done on paper, he said. Alice couldn't help smiling as she took out her memorandum book and worked the sum for him. 365, subtract 1, 364. They did the little math up here on the top of the page. Humpty Dumpty took the book and looked at it carefully. That seems to be done right, he began. You're holding it upside down, Alice interrupted. To be sure I was, Humpty Dumpty said gaily as she turned it round for him. I thought it looked a little queer. As I was saying, that seems to be done right, though I haven't the time to look over it thoroughly just now. And that shows that there are 364 days where you might get unbirthday presents. Certainly, said Alice. And only one for birthday presents, you know. There's glory for you. I don't know what you mean by glory, Alice said. Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously. Of course you don't, till I tell you. I meant there's a nice knockdown argument for you. But glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument, Alice objected. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice, whether you can make words mean so many different things. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, which is to be master. That's all. Alice was too much puzzled to say anything. So after a minute, Humpty Dumpty began again. They have a temper, some of them, particularly verbs. They're the proudest. Adjectives you can do anything with, but not verbs. However, I can manage the whole lot of them impenetrably. That's what I say. Would you tell me, please, said Alice, what that means? Now you talk like a reasonable child, said Humpty Dumpty, looking very much pleased. I mean it by impenetrability that we've had enough of that subject, and it would be just as well if you mention what you mean to do next, as I suppose you don't mean to stop here all the rest of your life. That, that's a great deal to make one word mean, Alice said in a thoughtful tone. So impenetrability, this means all of that. What are you doing next, Alice? You're not staying here for the rest of your life, are you? That's a great deal to make one word mean, Alice said in a thoughtful tone. When I make a word do a lot of work like that, said Humpty Dumpty, I always pay it extra. Oh, said Alice. She was too much puzzled to make any other remark. Ah, you should see him come round me of a Saturday night, Humpty Dumpty went on, wagging his head gravely from side to side. For to get their wages, you know. Alice didn't venture to ask what he paid them with. So you see, I can't tell you. She should have asked. Alice is always asking questions. She didn't ask what they got paid in. It was probably tiger lily petals. You seem very clever at explaining words, sir, said Alice. Would you kindly tell me the meaning of the poem called Jabberwocky? Let's hear it, said Humpty Dumpty. I can explain all the poems that ever were invented, and a good many that haven't been invented just yet. This sounded very hopeful, so Alice repeated the first verse. "'Twas brillig and the slithy tovs, the gyre and gimble in the wob. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the morum rats o' grab. That's enough to begin with, Humpty Dumpty interrupted. There are plenty of hard words there. Brillig means 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the time when you begin broiling things for dinner. That'll do very well, said Alice. And slithy? Well, slithy means lithe and slimy. Lithe is the same as active. You see, it's like portmanteau, and there are two meanings packed up into one word. I see it now, Alice remarked thoughtfully. And what are toves? Well, toves are something like badgers, there's something like lizards, and there's something like corkscrews. They must be very curious looking creatures. They are that, said Humpty Dumpty. And also they make their nests under sundials. And also they live on cheese. What's the gyre and to the gimbal? To gyre is to go round and round like a gyroscope. To gimbal is to make holes like a gimlet. And the wob is the grass plot around a sundial, I suppose, said Alice, surprised at her own ingenuity. Of course it is. It's called wob, because it goes a long way before it and a long way behind it, and a long way beyond it on each side, Alice added. Exactly so. Well then, Mimsy is flimsy and miserable. There's another portmanteau for you. And Borogov is a thin, shabby looking bird with its feathers sticking out all around, something live like a live mop. And then the mome raths, said Alice. I'm afraid I'm giving you a great deal of trouble. Well, a rath is a sort of green pig, but a mome I'm not certain about. I think it's short for from home, meaning that they'd lost their way. So those are the raths over there in the back, those pigs. And then toves, those are the toves. They're somewhat like badgers. Mm. And then those little birds, yeah. Borogov is a thin, shabby-looking bird with its feathers sticking out all around, something like a live mop. But all of those things are there under the sundial. Right. Well, a wrath is a sort of green pig, but mome, I'm not certain about. I think it's short for from home, meaning that they lost their way. And what does outgrab mean? Well, outgribbing is something between bellowing and whistling with a kind of sneeze in the middle. However, you'll hear it done maybe down in the wood yonder, and when you've done it and when you've once heard it, you'll be quite content. Who's been repeating all that hard stuff to you? These books are just such nonsense. Oh, my brain is all mixed up. Well, outgribbing is something between bellowing and whistling, and a kind of with a kind of sneeze in the middle. Bellowing and whistling with a kind of sneeze in the middle. However, you'll hear it done maybe down in the wood yonder, and when you've once heard it, you'll be quite content. Who's been repeating all that hard stuff to you? I read it in a book, said Alice, but I had some poetry repeated to me much easier than that, by Tweedledee, I think it was. As to poetry, said Humpty Dumpty, stretching out one of his great hands, I can repeat poetry as well as other folk, if it comes to that. Oh, it needn't come to that, Alice said hastily, hoping to keep him from beginning. The piece I'm going to repeat, he went on without noticing her remark, was written entirely for your amusement. Alice felt that in that case she really ought to listen to it, so she sat down and said, "Thank you," rather sadly. In winter, when the fields are white, I sing this song for your delight. Only I don't sing it, he added as an explanation. I see you don't, said Alice. You can see whether I'm singing or not. You've sharper eyes than most, Humpty Dumpty remarked severely. Alice was silent. In spring, when the woods are getting green, I'll try and tell you what I mean. Thank you very much, said Alice. In summer, when the days are long, perhaps you'll understand the song. In autumn, when the leaves are brown, take pen and ink and write it down. I will if I can remember it so long, said Alice. You needn't go on making remarks like that, Humpty Dumpty said. They're not sensible, and they put me out. I sent a message to the fish. I told them, this is what I wish. The little fishes of the sea, they sent an answer back to me. The little fish's answer was, we cannot do it, sir, because I'm afraid I don't quite understand, said Alice. It gets easier further on, Humpty Dumpty replied. I sent them again to say it will be better to obey. The fishes answered with a grin, what a temper you are in. I told them once, I told them twice. They would not listen to advice. I took a kettle large and new, fit for the deed I had to do. My heart went hop, my heart went thump. I filled the kettle at the pump. Then someone came then someone came to me and said, the little fishes are in bed. I said to him, I said it plain, then you must wake them up again. I said it very loud and clear. I went and shouted in his ear. Humpty Dumpty raised his voice almost to a scream as he repeated this verse, and Alice thought with a shudder, I wouldn't have been the messenger for anything. But he was very stiff and I think that part was supposed to be said. I said it to him. I said it to him. I said it plain, and then you must wake him up again. I said it loud. I said it very loud and clear. I went and shouted in his ear. Humpty Dumpty raised his voice almost to scream as he repeated this verse, and Alice thought with a shudder, I wouldn't have been the messenger for anything. But he was very stiff and proud. He said, you needn't shout so loud. He was very proud and stiff. He said, I'd go and wake them if I took a corkscrew from the shelf. I went to wake them up myself. And when I found the door was locked, I pulled and pushed and kicked and knocked. And when I found the door was shut, I tried to turn the handle, but there's a long pause. That all? Alice timidly asked. That's all, said Humpty Dumpty. Goodbye. This was rather sudden, Alice thought, but after such a very strong hint that she ought to be going, she felt that it would hardly be civil to stay. So she got up and held out her hand. Goodbye, till we meet again, she said cheerfully as she could. I shouldn't know you again if we did meet, Humpty Dumpty replied in a discontented tone, giving her one of his fingers to shake. You're so exactly like other people. The face is what one goes by generally, Alice remarked in a thoughtful tone. That's just what I com- that's just what I complain of, said Humpty Dumpty. Your face is the same as everybody has. The two eyes, so marking their places in the air with his thumb, nose in the middle, mouth under. It's always the same. Now, if you had two eyes on the same side of the nose, for instance, or the mouth at the top, that would be some help. It wouldn't look nice, Alice objected, but Humpty Dumpty only shut his eyes and said, Wait till you've tried. Alice waited a minute to see if he would speak again, but as he never opened his eyes or took any further notice of her, said goodbye once more, and getting no answer to this, she quietly walked away. But she couldn't help saying to herself as she went, Of all the unsatisfactory, she repeated this aloud, as it was a great comfort to have such a long word to say. Of all the unsatisfactory people I ever met, she never finished the sentence, for at this moment a heavy crash shook the forest from end to end. What is the crash chat? We will find out next time. Chapter 7, The Lion and the Unicorn. Do 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 do. We're gonna go ahead and we'll leave you with the next picture. Here it is. I have no idea what's gonna happen next, but yes, we're about halfway through the story, which is pretty good. Pretty sure that we can finish it tomorrow. I'm gonna stop yawning in your face. Thank you for joining me. Please follow Japan Spitz. We're getting him to 1,000,000 this year. Please, please, please go like, subscribe, Japan Spitz. Leave us some comments. Give me some feedback, please. Go and follow us on all our socials. Join our Discord. Join our Minecraft realm, please. Come build with us. And until tomorrow, I'll see you then. We're here. We're gonna finish this book. I gotta also return this to the library, which is part of the reason why I'm rushing. So we gotta get it done. We have to get it done. There's no way I'm returning this book. I mean, I guess we could like renew it, but no, we're finishing it. We're doing it, chat. We're doing the damn thing. I will see you tomorrow. Take care, be well, and make sure you're taking care of yourselves, drinking plenty of water, having some good, nutritious food. Go get some exercise and touch some grass, Make sure you're washing your freaking hands and don't forget to smile, everybody. All right, we'll see you next time. Da 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 dum da dum dum. Da 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 dum dum da dum da dum da da dum. Dee 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 dim dim dee 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 dim dee 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 dim dee dee dim dum da 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 dum da da dum.